segue into what the banking space looks like at the moment. I want to get your take on bank valuations, what looks good, what doesn't. We'll then move on to some diversified financials and then come back to a couple of picks of yours. Banking space, in terms of your coverage of the big four banks, you've got buyers on 3 of them, bar CBA. What is the banking backdrop now? They rallied too hard.
On the face of it, they have, but as Crowley was talking at the start, valuations depend on your view of what discount rate you should be using. Major bank share prices based on a discount rate of 9% per annum. Basically, that translates into dividend yields of around 5.5% and long-term growth rates of 3 to 4%. I have CBA, the only one not a buy on hold, because when I've done my bank valuations on the basis of 4% long-term growth, and the value I get for CBA for that is $78, which is a little below where it is at the moment. The others I get all about 50 cents to $1 above their current share price, and that's why they're all on buys. But the reason I mentioned what Crowley said first off about discount rate, because if the market starts using an 8% discount rate, for example, then you will see the dividend yields fall as long as the growth outlook doesn't change. Well, I mentioned 4, that's about nominal GDP at the moment. So if that doesn't, if 4% remains a reasonable long-term growth number to use, then dividend yields will fall and bank shares will go way above the price targets that I have. That's why what the market considers to be the right discount rate or the right alternative return on your money is so important. To give you some historical context for this, before the world exploded about 10 years ago, about 11% was the discount rate that was used very consistently for banks, big banks, regional banks, and insurers. So we may be in a period where, notwithstanding the fact that banks look fully valued, they may continue to run if the market looks at a lower interest rate for longer and applies that consistently to the equities market.
So it's basically, if interest rates continue to go low but the economy stays together, it doesn't fall apart, housing stays together. So, you know, if you think about the election outcome, banks rallied a long way the day after the election. Westpac, as Crowley suggested, was up 9% on the day. We've had a couple of other positive catalysts in terms of the banks thereafter. Interest rates being cut, questionable, obviously, whether it's a positive or not, and I'll get your take there shortly, as well as changes to serviceability standards. What's your take in terms of, you know, the changing regulatory environment is one. You know, under a coalition government, does it make it easier for banks to lend money? And does that have a, you know, a meaningful impact on your assessment of likely loan growth, etc., going forward?
Yeah, the most important influences are level of interest rates and what APRA does on serviceability tests. You may know that currently it uses 7.5% for the serviceability test, 7.5% interest rate for the serviceability tests. That's what the major banks use. It sets a standard of a minimum of 7, and with a nod and a wink, the major banks know the right number to use is 7.25.
Is there more nods and winks under a coalition government?
No, there's always nods and winks. It's a behind closed doors arrangement. And now what they're planning to do is change the serviceability test to 2.5% over whatever interest rate you're paying on your mortgage. So at the moment, at a 3.5% mortgage, then the serviceability test would be done at 6%, which means that people can borrow a lot more.
Is it 10-15% more?
Yeah, roughly 10%. And from the numbers I've done, that should boost house prices by the order of 10%. House prices go up by about 10%, and other things being equal, you largely have credit growth being, housing credit growth, I should say, being 10% higher, which of course is a great benefit to the banks.
what is the market got factored in now? What's your numbers on loan growth? I think you're at 4%.
4.
So it's a
The
bit,
bank share prices basically include between 3 and 4, closer to 4, depending on how, what day you're talking about, but at the moment it's quite close to 4.
so Rocky had his rose-coloured glasses on before, looking at iron ore prices being sustained above 110 for 6 to 12 months or so, and put out some pretty bullish prices for what miners could trade at.
You mean if the discount rate's at 8, what would the share price
If the discount rate's at 8 and we're getting loan growth at 10%,
well,
where are we looking in terms of bank share prices?
basically multiply them if, they're typically
On the spot.
yields about 5.5%. If the yields go to 4.5%, then the share price is at 55 divided by 45 times the current share price. So you're up about 15 to 20%.
Sounds good. So 20 to 15 to 20%
So
growth plus dividends.
So you would be looking at
But then
ComBank in that scenario.
96 bucks, roughly.
Would be more than 8. Privilege.
We hold it for the banks in the portfolio.
What a fabulous outcome.
So the banks, there's been a lot of people who are downbeat about the banks, and if I look at banks at the moment, obviously lower cash rates, and if the economy stays together, bank dividend yields being sustainable, as a gentleman suggested in the audience earlier, they look reasonable value to me. I know CBA from a relative valuation standpoint is expensive. And do you, from your point of view, looking at CBA, is that valuation, it tends to trade on a valuation premium to the other banks of somewhere, my numbers around 8 to 10%. Is that justified in terms of CBA, or is all banks the same?
No, in fact, all banks are very different. Notwithstanding the fact that they are all substantially Australian mortgage banks, CBA and Westpac are about 60%. Australian mortgage banks, and by that I'm talking about the size of their balance sheets, NAB's 52, if I remember correctly, and ANZ's high 40s. So they're substantially the same, but because those percentages are different, then that has a material impact on multiples that apply to them. While you typically think of PEs, I think of price to NTAs. You see the differences much more significantly when you look at price to NTAs. So you would think, given that, I don't know if you know this, but the return on a mortgage product is at least 30% per annum, the ROE on a mortgage product. So when you think
because
about,
they hold so little capital against it.
yeah, and the margins that you pay as a borrower. So therefore, the greater proportion of your portfolio represented by, as a bank, represented by mortgages, the greater your ROE is going to be. Then the next, and so CBA and Westpac you would think would have similar ROEs or return on NTAs is what I focus on. But CBA is a bit above Westpac, and that's because they have a lower cost deposit base. Basically, all the hardly any interest paying transaction accounts they have a very significant advantage over all the others. And then next in the multiple ranking is NAB, because it hasn't wasted its money in Asia. And ANZ is right down the bottom because it has wasted money in Asia. In fact, $1 in 6 of its capital is still wasted in Asia, and ROE consistently below 10 and typically around about 5.
So the Asian growth story didn't work.
Well, I always thought it was ridiculous.
All right, so I guess that in a nutshell, banks can go higher from here if economic conditions stay together. If interest rates stay low and go lower, that's a positive
In
backdrop
the
for the
Goldilocks
banks.
world, absolutely.
If everything stays